Welcome to this video, the second video on mistakes in the foundation series of the Desperate Pianist. The videos that go further to help you solve your problems. This video is all about identifying the type of mistake you're making and how to cure it. The best way not to make mistakes is to strangle them at birth, and by that I mean lay proper foundations for pieces with good learning and practice techniques, and then they will not be allowed to flourish. Concentrate on your pieces when you're playing. Don't let your mind wander off. During practice as well as performance, playing an instrument is not like listening to the radio. You can't sit back and relax. Otherwise you get sloppy and the flaws will creep in. A persistent mistake is often where there's a lot going on in both hands and we've just got overload. Let's move over to the piano and have a look at a case in point. These three bars here were quite difficult for me. There's these octaves in the right hand. They're awkward because the black notes and white notes are mixed in together, the intervals between the octaves vary awkwardly, and the rhythm's slightly syncopated, and that takes up a lot of resources. The left hand moves through the keys quite quickly, it has some medium jumps, and with lots of awkward chords as well. That takes up resources. So to get through this, what we've got to do is to load each hand into motor memory as much as possible so that both hands then are on autopilot and we can get through this without overloading our data flow. It takes a fair bit of work, and then again when we recombine the two, but it's worth it because in the end we have a section that we can play. I still celebrate when I get through this bit relatively unscathed, but it will come, especially if you apply some of our advanced practice techniques to help you. Another source of mistakes is you might have learnt something one way and now you're playing it another. For example, you've changed the fingering without realising it. And what's happened is that you've created a conflict of competing memories, and at that point you don't know which one to use. It's usually best to revert to the original because that's the most embedded. But the thing to do is to keep referring to your score so this doesn't arise. The problem might also be that you're looking at one hand and not concentrating on both hands. For example, if you've got a difficult part in the right hand, like Teddy has here, and actually you haven't learnt the left part, then you're faltering because it's the left hand and not the difficult bit in the right hand. I came across an example of this just a couple of days ago. If you look at the second half of this bar, in the right hand, there's some thirds that take a little bit of getting into your head. The left hand is fairly simple, it's just this octave and that octave. But I found out that I wasn't getting it right, and when I looked into it I found that I hadn't learnt that jump down to there. So although I was thinking, the right hand's difficult, I need to concentrate, that jump in the left hand was putting me off and making a problem area where I was making a mistake. Once I got the jump sorted, lo and behold, it became a lot more doable. There can be places inside the music itself which will trip you up. For example, there might be a pattern of notes and then another one which is only just a little bit different. and keep an eye open for those. When you see them, you realise what they are and you can sort the problem out. There might be small differences in repeated passages. It can be really annoying when a composer changes a chord for another inversion. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, because it can remind you where you are, which passage you're playing. But also, if it's a real problem, you could just play the original twice. You can come across a fork in the road where if you've got an identical or similar section in a piece, they might lead to different outcomes, or even 3 different outcomes sometimes. I find that if you've used the Desperate Pianist really good practice techniques, they don't tend to be a problem because you've built your knowledge of the piece from the ground up. Let's have a quick look at the 3 points in that last slide. Here in this piece there's a B flat 7 chord followed by these notes. Later on in the piece there's the same B flat chord followed by these notes. Now, it's obvious there's a difference, but subconsciously, when we play the B flat chord and then go down to the B flat, at this point we either play the B natural or we play the C. And if we're making a mistake here, that means we haven't cleared up the confusion in our minds. So it's a case of identifying this kind of thing, which is surprisingly hard to find sometimes, and making sure we're consciously aware of which one to do. Here in the same piece is a place where the composer has made 2 different inversions of the same chord in exactly the similar place. So for example, here we have an inversion of the E flat 7, and here again we have the other inversion. Now if you've just learnt the first inversion, then the second inversion's got to be relearnt all over again. The composer probably does want the effect of the inversion, but it can make it quite tricky if you find it hard to remember and you've got one way embedded. So once again, it's up to you. Play it as it's marked, but if you really have to, you could leave it as the one inversion for both times. And the final point, the fork in the road, here in this Silver Swan rag, there's actually 4 bars that are exactly the same that lead to different passages or the end of the piece. And I'll play them to you. If you're not sure where you're going at each point when you play each of these 4 bars, then you will have a vulnerability which may cause you to make a mistake. Many years ago, a piano teacher once told me the only reason you make a mistake is because you're going too fast. And there's a lot of truth in that. If you go faster than your brain can process the data flow, you will fall over, and that applies to a lot of things, not just the piano. Use our favourite tool, the metronome, to see if this is indeed the case. It can be surprising sometimes. And try to develop the skill of being able to moderate your speed while you're playing. If you feel that you're beginning to go a little bit too fast, just make a mental effort to bring yourself back down into the comfort zone. It may be that the mistake is not just where you think it is. Have a look around the area of a mistake, especially just before a mistake. There may be a slightly more difficult bit which you can do, but it leaves you compromised with your resources for when you get to that difficult bit. And if you can polish up that bit that's just before your mistake, you will find the mistake is much easier to sort out. If we go back to the bar or measure that we looked at earlier, we can see in the first half that there are some thirds leading up to the difficult bit in the second half of the bar. Now, if we don't have these properly mastered, then we'll already be distracted for when we arrive at the more difficult bit later on. So it goes without saying that we need to master this first half of the bar. Interestingly, I was playing this A and C sharp with my thumb and middle finger, and when I changed it to my first finger and my thumb, it made it a lot easier. Incidentally, we'll be doing this kind of thing on specially selected pieces as part of Ben's piano lesson for subscribers on the website.